The silence of a hospital at 3 a.m. is not really silent. It is a symphony of suffering. The hum of the air conditioner, the distant squeak of a nurse's shoes on the linoleum, and that ever-present hiss of the oxygen machine. My world had shrunk to the size of a 20-bed and the 216 tiles on the ceiling. I couldn't move my head. I couldn't scream. Every time I tried to draw a breath, it felt like someone was driving a rusted nail into my chest. My right lung was a collapsed ruin. My ribs were a jigsaw puzzle of broken bone. I waited. In the fog of pain medications, I waited for a hand to hold mine. I waited for my sister Margot to walk through that door, her eyes red from crying, telling me that everything would be okay. We were sisters. We were the Sinclair girls. We had survived our father's drunken rages and our mother's cold indifference. We only had each other, or so I thought.
Nurse Colleen came in to check my vitals. She was efficient, but her hands were trembling slightly as she adjusted the IV drip. She looked at the empty chair beside my bed, the chair that had been empty for 5 days. Is Margot outside? I managed to wheeze. My voice sounded like someone dragging a heavy stone over gravel. Colleen stopped. She didn't look at me. She looked at the heart monitor. "Acacia," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I shouldn't tell you this while you're in this state, but I can't watch you wait for someone who isn't coming." She leaned in closer. "The night you were brought in, your sister Margot arrived. She was here for exactly 20 minutes. She didn't ask the doctors about your surgery. She didn't ask if you would walk again. She went straight to the business office. She signed a document, a financial waiver, stating that the family assumes no responsibility for your long-term care or costs. She told the staff you were estranged, and then she walked out to her Mercedes without looking back." Estranged. That word felt sharper than the glass that had cut my skin during the crash. We had dinner the night before. We laughed. We shared a bottle of wine. How could we be estranged?
Let's talk about that night. The night my life became a horror movie. It was raining. That cold, stinging Connecticut rain that turns the roads into mirrors. I was leaving my parents' house. Margot had been so kind that evening. She had hugged me tight and whispered, "Drive safe, little sister. Use the back road by the bridge. The highway's too crowded tonight." I trusted her. I always trusted her. I was doing 45 miles per hour when I approached the sharp curve past the old stone bridge. I saw the yellow warning sign. I moved my foot to the brake pedal. I pressed down. There was no resistance. The pedal hit the floorboard with a sickening thud. My heart skipped a beat. Panic, cold and electrical, shot through my spine. I pumped the brakes, once, twice, 10 times. Nothing. The car was accelerating downhill. The guardrail was a blur of silver. "Please, no," I whispered. "Not like this." The last thing I saw before the impact was the headlights of an oncoming truck, and the last thing I felt was the steering wheel crushing into my chest. Then everything went black. A blackness that cost $34.99.
A week after I woke up, the door to my room creaked open. It wasn't Margot. It wasn't my parents. It was Danny Oakes. Danny was a guy I'd known since high school, a grease monkey with a heart of gold who ran the best repair shop in the county. He didn't bring flowers. He brought a heavy, grease-stained manila envelope. He sat in the visitor's chair, the one my sister had avoided like it was radioactive. "Acacia," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "I went to see your car at Henley's impound lot. I told them I was your insurance adjuster, just to get a look under the hood." He pulled out a stack of high-resolution photos. They were gruesome, twisted metal, shattered glass. But then he showed me a close-up of the undercarriage. "Look at this," Danny pointed to a specific line. "Your brake lines didn't snap, Acacia. They didn't rust out. These are clean cuts. Someone used a specialized pair of automotive snips, and they didn't just cut them. They notched them so they'd hold together for a few miles, and then fail the moment you hit a high-pressure turn." The room felt like it was spinning. I remembered Margot's hands that night at dinner. She had been wearing those thin, stylish leather gloves. She said her hands were cold. She had spent 15 minutes outside taking a phone call while I was in the kitchen with Mom.
While my body was broken, my mind began to work like a clock. I called Helen Ashford. Helen was our grandmother Frances's attorney and a woman who didn't take any nonsense from anyone. She came to the hospital under the guise of a friend to avoid Margot's suspicion. "Helen," I whispered, "tell me about the trust." Helen adjusted her glasses and sighed. "Your grandmother was a wise woman, Acacia. She saw the greed in your sister's eyes years ago. She set up a $2.3 million trust, half for you, half for Margot. But there was a catch, a survivorship clause. If one of you passed away before the final distribution at age 30, the entire remaining balance would go to the surviving sister. My 30th birthday was only 11 months away." "Margot and Brett are drowning," Helen continued, her voice dropping an octave. "Brett's real estate firm is a Ponzi scheme. They are $2 million in debt to the IRS. They don't see you as a sister anymore, Acacia. They see you as a $1.15 million life insurance policy that hasn't paid out yet." I couldn't stay in that bed anymore. With Helen's help and some heavy pain meds, I started my own investigation from a laptop in my hospital bed. We started looking at bank records. Margot is smart, but she's arrogant. She thinks she's untouchable because of her socialite status in the city. We found a transaction on her secondary credit card, the one Brett doesn't see. 3 days before my accident, Margot drove 40 miles to a small Home Depot in a town where nobody knows her. She bought 3 things: a heavy-duty flashlight, a pair of industrial nitrile gloves, and a $34.99 pair of professional-grade automotive cutters. The total was exactly $42.48 with tax. $42.48. That was the price of my life. She didn't even use a burner phone or cash. She was so confident I'd be dead in a ravine on Route 7 that she didn't think she'd ever have to answer for that receipt.
While Margot was planning my funeral, she was also playing the role of the grieving sister on social media. I spent my nights scrolling through her Instagram. One post showed a picture of us when we were kids. The caption read, "My heart is shattered. My beautiful sister Acacia is fighting for her life. Please pray for a miracle. Family is everything. Hashtag Sinclair Strong. Hashtag Prayers for Acacia." The comments were filled with blue heart emojis and messages of support from her high society friends. "You're so strong, Margot. Acacia is lucky to have you." I wanted to vomit. She was using my near-death experience to gain likes and sympathy points, while she was literally counting the days until the machines were turned off. She had even started fundraising for my medical bills, money that I knew would never see a hospital pharmacy. It was going straight to Brett's offshore accounts. On the 10th day, the doctor said I was stable enough to leave, though I was in a wheelchair and could barely breathe without gasping. Margot had told the hospital she would pick me up on Friday. "No," I told Nurse Colleen. "We're leaving now, today, Wednesday." "But your sister—" "My sister is the reason I'm in this chair, Colleen. Please, help me." Colleen didn't ask another question. She had seen the financial waiver Margot signed. She knew what kind of monster my sister was. She helped me check out quietly. Helen Ashford was waiting at the back entrance in a black SUV. I didn't go back to my apartment. Margot had the spare key. I went to a safe house, a small lakeside cabin owned by Helen's firm. No Wi-Fi, no landline, no Margot. For the next 2 weeks, the world thought I was still in the hospital. Margot thought I was still her helpless little sister. She was preparing for her big night, the annual charity gala at the country club. She thought that would be the night she'd announce my passing. She didn't know I was learning how to walk again, and I was walking straight for her. To understand the monster Margot had become, you have to look behind the velvet curtains of her life. To the outside world, Margot and Brett were the it couple of Fairfield County. The $4 million mansion, the matching Range Rovers, the summer trips to the Amalfi Coast. It was a masterpiece of branding. But Helen Ashford's investigators found the cracks. Brett's real estate empire was a house of cards built on predatory loans and forged signatures. They hadn't paid their mortgage in 7 months.
The power couple was 48 hours away from a foreclosure notice being taped to their front door. Margot didn't just want my money. She needed it to survive. In her mind, I wasn't her sister anymore. I was a life raft, and she was willing to drown me to keep her head above water. She had spent years looking down at me for my simple life as a graphic designer, never realizing that my simple life was built on a foundation of honesty, something she couldn't even define. While I stayed at the cabin, the physical pain was nothing compared to the psychological warfare. I sat by the lake every morning, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, watching the mist rise off the water. My lungs were healing, but my heart was hardening into a diamond. I practiced walking, 10 steps, then 20, then 50. Each step felt like walking on broken glass, but I whispered a number with every movement. 34.99, 34.99. I watched Margot through a burner phone. She was posting videos of herself organizing my belongings. She was literally going through my apartment, picking out what she wanted to keep and what she wanted to sell. She even posted a video holding my favorite childhood teddy bear, weeping for her followers. "Don't worry, Acacia," she whispered to the camera. "I'm taking care of everything." She had no idea I was watching her. She had no idea the dead girl was standing 5 miles away, counting down the minutes until the gala. The night of the Millbrook Country Club Gala arrived. This was the social event of the year. The parking lot was a sea of black SUVs and Italian sports cars. Inside, the ballroom was decorated in gold and deep red. Margot was the hostess. She looked breathtaking in a custom-made silk gown, ironically the color of a fresh bruise. She moved through the room like a politician, accepting hugs and "I'm so sorries" from people who didn't even know my middle name. "She's stabilized," I heard Margot tell a group of donors near the bar. "But the brain damage, the doctors say she may never be the same. It's a tragedy. I've already looked into long-term facilities in upstate New York. It's best for her to be tucked away." Tucked away. Like an old coat. Like a mistake. At 9 p.m., the music dimmed. Margot took the stage for the keynote speech. She stood behind the mahogany podium, the spotlight catching the diamonds at her throat, diamonds I knew were bought with a loan she couldn't repay. "Family," Margot began, her voice quivering with practiced emotion. "Family is the anchor that holds us in the storm. My sister Acacia is my world, and though she cannot be here tonight, I want to dedicate this evening to her spirit." The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. That's when I opened the double oak doors at the back of the hall. I wasn't in a hospital gown. I wasn't in a wheelchair. I was wearing a black dress that cost more than Margot's monthly mortgage payment, a gift from Helen's personal collection. I didn't use a cane. I walked down the center aisle, my eyes locked on Margot's. The silence changed. It went from respectful to confused, and then to pure electric shock. People began to whisper. Margot stopped mid-sentence. Her tan face turned a shade of gray I had never seen on a living human. "You're late for the dedication, Margot," I said. My voice wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a blade. "I thought you said I couldn't speak? I thought you said I was tucked away?" I didn't wait for her to respond. I walked up the stairs to the stage. Margot backed away from the podium, her hands shaking so violently she dropped her wine glass. It shattered on the stage, red wine splashing onto her dress like blood. I turned to the audience. "My sister is a wonderful storyteller," I told the crowd, but she forgot the most important part of the story. She forgot to mention the trip to Home Depot in Danbury. She forgot to mention the $34.99 brake line cutters. I pulled out a small remote. Helen had already hacked the ballroom's projector system. Suddenly, the giant screen behind Margot changed. It wasn't a slideshow of our childhood photos anymore. It was the high-definition security footage from the Home Depot. There was Margot, in her designer sunglasses, buying the tools of my attempted murder. Then, the screen changed again, showing the bank records, the $2 million debt, and finally, the forensic photos of my severed brake lines. "You didn't sign the waiver to protect the family, Margot," I shouted over the gasps of the crowd. "You signed it because you thought I wouldn't live long enough to sue you. You signed it because you were already spending my inheritance in your head."
The ballroom of the Millbrook Country Club, once a place of prestige, was now a courtroom of public opinion. Margot stood frozen on the stage, the blue light from the projector casting a ghostly glow on her face. The security footage of her buying those cutters looped behind her, over and over again. $34.99 for my life? It's a lie! Margot finally shrieked, her voice cracking like thin ice. She looked at the crowd, desperate for a friendly face. "Acacia is brain damaged. She's hallucinating. Brett, tell them she's crazy." But Brett wasn't there to save her. I looked toward the VIP table where my brother-in-law had been sitting. The chair was empty. Brett Whitfield, the man who had helped her plan my death, had seen the police officers entering through the kitchen doors and had bolted. He left his wife, his partner in crime, to face the fire alone. "He's gone, Margot," I said, stepping closer to her. "Just like the life you thought you could steal." The police didn't just find the receipt. They found the gloves you threw in the dumpster 3 miles from the crash site. They found your DNA inside them. You weren't just a planner, Margot. You were the executioner.
The double doors at the back of the room opened again. This time, it wasn't a guest. 4 officers from the state police moved down the aisle with purpose. The guests parted like the Red Sea. Margot tried to run. She turned toward the back of the stage, tripping on the hem of her crimson gown. She fell to her knees, the same knees she had used to pray for me on Instagram. As she struggled to get up, a detective named Ray Kendall stepped onto the stage. "Margot Sinclair Whitfield," his voice boomed through the speakers. "You are under arrest for attempted first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and grand larceny." The sound of the handcuffs clicking into place was the most beautiful music I had ever heard. It was a sharp, metallic snap that ended 30 years of her shadow over my life. As they let her off the stage, past her friends who were now recording her disgrace on their iPhones, she looked at me one last time. There was no love in her eyes, only a cold, dark void. "I should have cut the lines deeper," she hissed as she passed me. I didn't flinch. "You should have loved me more," I whispered back. The aftermath was a slow-motion car crash of its own. Margot's arrest was the lead story on every news outlet from Hartford to Manhattan. The Sinclair socialite was now inmate number 88291. Brett was caught 48 hours later at a motel near the Canadian border. He took a plea deal within the week, testifying against Margot to save his own skin. He detailed everything, how they had sat at their marble kitchen island, sipping expensive wine, while they discussed exactly which curve on Route 7 would be my final resting place. My parents? That was the hardest part. They didn't go to Margot's trial, and they didn't come to my apartment. They moved to a small town in Florida, unable to look at the daughter they had almost lost, or the daughter who had become a monster. They sent me a letter once, but I didn't open it. Some wounds don't need stitches. They need to be left alone. 11 months later, I woke up in my own bed. The sun was streaming through the windows of my new apartment. It was my 30th birthday. I checked my bank account. There it was, the final distribution of the Sinclair Trust, $1.15 million, plus Margot's share, which had been forfeited to me under the Slayer rule of the trust, a legal provision that prevents a criminal from inheriting from their victim. I didn't buy a mansion. I didn't buy a Range Rover. I sat at my small wooden table and wrote a check. $500,000 to the Millbrook Community Clinic, specifically for their trauma and physical therapy wing. Then I wrote another check to Danny Oakes to expand his shop. I walked over to the mirror. I pulled down the collar of my shirt to look at the scars on my chest, the places where the tubes had been, the places where the bones had broken. They weren't ugly anymore. They were armor.
I often think about that Home Depot receipt, $34.99. It's such a small amount of money. You can buy a decent steak for that. You can buy a couple of movie tickets.
Or, if you're like my sister, you can try to buy a soul. Margot is currently serving a 25-year sentence at the York Correctional Institution. She spends her days in a gray room, counting the tiles on her own ceiling. I wonder if she's reached 216 yet. As for me, I'm going for a drive today. I'm going to take Route 7. I'm going to drive past that stone bridge and that sharp curve, but this time I won't be afraid, because I know my brakes work, and I know that the only thing I left behind in that ravine was the girl who was afraid of her sister. Subscribe to us to get regular videos all the time. Hidden Sad Story 2.0. Thanks.